Thank you very much, Marani. You may not know it, those who are here, but maybe I should. First of all, I've been vaccinated twice. I mean, with two different products. The first one is Sputnik. You know the story of Sputnik. And the second one is Moderna. But I still know that I can get infected, but probably not get killed by the virus, right? And I think this is important because there are so many things to be done between now and the near future that I don't get killed by something like coronavirus, right? My name is Matilu Mwau, and I'm happy to be here. I always get impressed by Strathmore University when I come in through that entrance, and just I'm wowed by the architecture. But I'm not here even to talk about infectious diseases where I'm a specialist. I'm here to talk about the kinds of things that we are doing after we were ambushed and surprised by the coronavirus pandemic from 2020, right? And one of those things was to think about vaccines for Kenya, all right? And we had been thinking about that for quite a bit of time. I'm going to talk about one initiative where I am steering the committee to assemble that initiative. But I want to start very quickly by telling you that, in fact, there are 3 initiatives that I'm aware of, not one. So I'm here to talk about the Smart Vaccines Production Facility that is intended for Konza Technopolis. But there are 2 other initiatives that you must be aware of right now. The first one is an initiative also driven by the government of Kenya that is called the Kenya Biovac Institute. The government of Kenya has put together a government company called the Biovac Institute, which is already incorporated and which is also going to be making vaccines. And that institute already has facilities in collaboration with KEMSA. The chairman of this overall initiative is also the chairman of the board of KEMRI. It's called Dr. Mbinda. And that initiative, in fact, if you check the newspapers, maybe last few weeks, you saw an advertisement for a consultant to help that initiative put up this sort of facility, right? That's one. The second one is activities by Dawa Pharmaceuticals to assemble a vaccines manufacturing plant in Thika. These are not theoretical activities. This is something that is going on as we speak. And in fact, I've seen some money on the ground already. I've seen land already assembled for that purpose. But I'm going to talk about the one in which I am spending a bit of my time, and it's called the Smart Vaccines Production Facility in Konza. And next slide, please. So maybe we need to start thinking that coronavirus was not the first thing that killed us or put us in hospital. We have many infectious diseases for which vaccines exist, all right? And many of these are common causes of illness and death. I need not remind you that when you are small, you needed to have BCG, for instance, to have polio vaccination, and so on, mumps. And sometimes you caught things like chickenpox and stuff like that, right? So the thing that is affecting you now is coronavirus. When I checked just yesterday, I saw that at least 255 million, not 1,000, 255 million or more people have gotten infected with coronavirus in the world. And in our country, maybe something like a quarter of a million people, okay? But it has also killed more than 5,000 Kenyans, so it's something that concerns us very much and something for which a vaccine exists, just like TB and polio and so on, okay? We also know, looking at what happened from 2019, that the next big surprise is coming, okay? And the next big surprise is likely to be something for which a vaccine can have effect, either prevent us from going to hospital or dying, or even prevent us from getting infected. We don't know what that big surprise is, but it's conceivable that when we are thinking about the future, we need to think about how to prevent ourselves from getting killed by the next big surprise, okay? And the final thing I want to say here is that for those vaccines that you've been seeing in the public and private sector, Kenya has been paying for most of them, and for some of them, Kenya has been having a relationship with Gavi so that it can acquire those vaccines, so that Kenya has been paying just a little amount of money. But things have happened in Kenya since 2003. I need not remind you what happened from that time. But what the effect has been is that Kenya has been classified as not so poor anymore. And the moment Gavi heard that Kenya was not so poor anymore, Gavi decided that, in fact, the help we'll be giving with regard to vaccines is going to reduce dramatically, so that by 2027, you'll have nothing from us. You have to pay for them yourselves. Okay? And for that reason, Kenya has to think either whether it will raise more money to buy vaccines, or which may not necessarily always be available to us. You saw what happened with regard to corona, even if you have money, or Kenya should manufacture vaccines for itself. These are the questions Kenya asked itself before it began to think strategically about producing vaccines locally. All right? If it doesn't, it is possible that it will be spending more than 60 or 70 million dollars a year from 2027 just to buy vaccines. That is like 6, 7, 8 billion shillings. Remember the budget, the overall budget in Kenya, if you take 8 billion out of it, you are looking for trouble. This is big trouble there. So next slide, please. So the thing that you need to remember is that Africa manufactures a very little amount of vaccines. In fact, there are very few countries in Africa that have put together the infrastructure and the human resources to assemble vaccines. And some of them have been with the help of the Pasteur Institute, like Senegal, like maybe Tunisia, and so on. And some of them have had their own initiatives, like South Africa. And only very recently, you heard that countries like Rwanda and Ethiopia were interested in putting together their vaccines, especially for coronavirus, okay? But overall, Africa has been importing and paying for most of its vaccines. So it's not like we can go to the region and then get the vaccines from somebody. It's not as easy as just walk in with money and come out with vaccines. They aren't just there. And the other thing is to remember, if there are no vaccines in this region, who needs them? Kenya is an important player in East and Central Africa. Okay. East and Central Africa generally has about 600 million people, which is almost half the population of Africa. Okay. And Kenya is the biggest economy in East and Central Africa, and around the 7th, when I checked last, maybe we've sneaked into 6th largest economy in Africa. So if anybody is to play any big role in vaccines manufacturing, this is an opportunity for Kenya, because we also have well-developed human resources and we have the financial muscle when we decide to use the money properly. The Pharmacy and Poisons Board in Kenya is an important player in the vaccines business with regard to clinical trials, pharmacovigilance, and so on, but that capacity has not been there for obvious reasons, and this should be considered an opportunity to build even that capacity going forward. Now, when I talk about a comprehensive smart vaccines facility project, where I'm playing a role, what am I talking about? There are 3 things that we are thinking of. The first one is to put together research and development for vaccines development, R&D. The second one is to build a factory for vaccines from beginning to the end. And the third thing is to strengthen the regulatory space so that when we put out vaccines, when we are giving for those vaccines, they are passed through the regulations and they are safe products for everybody. And clinical trials are well managed and so on. Those are the 3 things I'm talking about when I talk about this initiative. Next slide. So, when Kenya thought through and looked at what happened in coronavirus, in the coronavirus pandemic, it began to take specific actions that are important for us going forward. In April of 2020, the Ministry of Health wrote to the Kenya Medical Research Institute and told Kenya Medical Research Institute, we have problems and would like you to take cognizance of those problems and determine the feasibility of putting together a vaccine manufacturing facility in Kenya. Okay? And in KEMRI very quickly moved in and invited stakeholders from all the important sectors, including the East Africa Community, Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, Kenya Red Cross, even all the important players, CAVI and so on, and began to put together a study to see whether it was feasible to assemble a vaccine production facility in Kenya. In fact, that report became available at the end of last year, and it said, yes, it is feasible, but there are various considerations. For instance, the financial considerations were very significant. The amount of effort on the ground was going to be very, very comprehensive. But that report is available in the public space, and it's a very interesting report. In May, just a month later, in 2020, the government of Kenya requested the government of Korea for help, for support in putting together, for a feasibility study, first of all, for smart vaccines production facility. Okay? And the government of Korea read through that request, and meanwhile, the Minister of Health again wrote to KEMRI and said that we would like to put together a steering committee that can look into this, and the steering committee was assembled. Okay? In September, this steering committee, in which I'm the chairman, went to Konza, Technopolis, to see whether there was an opportunity for us to put up a factory there. And the reason why we went to Konza was because Konza has had a good relationship with the Korean government. Okay? And Konza had already put together some infrastructure there that was driven with these sorts of facilities in mind. And next slide, please. This is what we found. That first of all, Konza is a huge tract of land, around 70 kilometers along Mombasa Road from Nairobi, 60-something kilometers. A huge tract of land, quite flat, nicely, and already some activity on the ground. In fact, the campus of the authority is in use. It's a big building, and the authority has divided that 5,000 acres of land into sectors or bands. And if you look at the far right, you can see the office band. The second, far right to the above the middle, where there is a dot saying Konza Technopolis above it, that is the life sciences band. In that band, you can put up vaccines manufacturing, you can put up hospitals, you can put up things that have life sciences theme around them. And we were even shown the particular plots of land where we can put up that facility without much trouble. And we saw that they had put in the water infrastructure, the electric communications, and so on. The roads and stuff are already in place. Next slide. This is a picture not taken by myself. I borrowed it from the internet from somebody who took a picture of the life sciences band from a balcony in the Konza Technopolis, right? With a lot of activity. This is an old picture. These days it's much more developed than this, but very impressive kind of space for us to put up this kind of thing. Next. So, going forward, in September of that year, we were satisfied that in fact there was a will and there was some assets available to us. And we put together a project concept note that we shared with the Ministry of Health and also with the Korean government. And in the meantime also, we began to form relationships with important players in this sector from the Korea International Vaccines Institute, KOICA and KOIF. And those players are important, especially with regard to capacity building for human resources for health in vaccines development. The concept note that we shared was not received well by everybody. Some people on the funding side decided that maybe Kenya did not have good enough infrastructure or good enough capability or could not demonstrate evidence that could sustain this sort of momentum. And it looked as though it was going to be difficult for us to get this support. So we sat back and we thought about what the opposition was, and in May this year, we had a webinar in which we invited everybody who may have any questions, and we explained what exactly we were thinking about. And then in October, just last month, the team from Korea came. The people who had not been satisfied were satisfied during the webinar, and they came. We went to the Ministry of Health, and we got a go-ahead from the Cabinet Secretary to proceed as quickly as possible and put this thing together. Okay? So what is going to happen? This month or next month, a consultant will be identified by this initiative, and that consultant is going to put together the documentation required to start the infrastructural and other activities going. And the consultant will have an assignment for around 10 months from around January this coming year. Okay? The budget for that consultancy work is $1.3 million. That's a grant from the Korean people. And the deputy project manager for this activity will be a Kenyan person, so that will be funded through this initiative and will be positioned in Kemri. At least there will be some office space for this kind of thing. Okay? And then the initial budget, in fact, after the webinar, the EDCF, which is the instrument they use for this kind of thing, had maybe around 12 projects that they thought were important, and the vaccines initiative was not one of them. And after the webinar, they decided that the vaccine initiative was going to be one of their most important considerations, and with the time they put at the top of the projects they have. So it's the highest priority for the Korean people with regard to Kenya at the moment. And in fact, even though we do not know how much money is going to cost to put this facility together, they already assembled $100 million to start off, but the overall cost will be dependent on a lot of things, including what the consultant finds out. So about $100 million available from a basket that contains about $1.2 billion. So if you have good justification, you can actually fetch more money from that basket. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to tell you about what the consultant should be doing. especially with regard to things like environmental impact assessment and so on, bill of quantities and stuff like that. No. The thing is that these activities cost a lot of money. People worry about putting up vaccines manufacturing because the monies alone are very significant and the human resources have not been retooled, and people worry about those sorts of things. But for us, the question you might want to ask is, are we thinking of a fill and finish facility or a complete facility from the beginning? So we are thinking about initially and finish, because we need to solve the problems now. Gavi will live in 2027, so we cannot start from scratch and start thinking, oh, by 2027 we'll put these things together. That's very difficult, okay? But in future, we must have bulk antigen production. We must have a research and development. Now, with regard to which vaccines are the most important, again, this is something that must be worked out. It's very difficult to assemble all the 20 or so many vaccines that you require in but the most important ones are the things that you can start with. And considering that there are 3 initiatives, it is conceivable that we could sit on the table and decide this initiative can handle these vaccines, this one can handle this one, and even those ones will end up not being sufficient. There is room for much more in this area. Next slide, please. So what are the timelines and the next steps? So the feasibility study is expected to have a report next year, including the basic design of the facility and the bid preparation from the consultant, okay? And it is conceivable that beginning of 2023, the bids will be evaluated and a contract can be issued. Now, the $100 million is not a grant, it's a loan. This is important for a country like Kenya to say quickly it's a loan. And then, but the interest rates are very small. I remember they were like less than 1%, like 0. Maybe 1%, right? So, but it's a loan, and this is very important for us when we are thinking. Okay? We expect a detailed design by 2023, and the construction to begin either 2023 or 2024. By that time, we'll have only 3 years before Gavi leaves, right? Technology transfer will be ongoing from around 2025, and some of those products that will have filled and finished will be ready for clinical trials for market authorization by 2026. Sometimes it's necessary for us to do clinical trials here, even if we knew the products out there were working and were okay. Okay? We'll probably take over the facility completely by 2029, after which we'll be doing bulk antigen production. And some of the questions that always come up have with sustainability and so on. But we think that the market is very large, and if we do this right, it's a sustainable initiative, and can save Kenya a lot of money and can also create economic activities for the country, and also save the lives of people in the region and even further beyond. Next slide. So thank you very much. So it's very important for me to indicate to you that we've received a lot of support from the Konza Technopolis, and I work for the Kenya Medical Research Institute. And the person who takes care of these activities in Korea is the Korean Exim Bank. Many of these countries, when they are doing grants and loans like this, they work through their export-import banks, and this is the same thing for Korea. And we are doing this on behalf of the Ministry of Health of the government of Kenya. And as I want to remind you again, this is not the only initiative. In fact, the ministry has indicated that it has 2 initiatives that it wants to drive in parallel and wants all of them to succeed. This is how serious these matters are, and I want to stop there, and I want to appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
I just want to check if we have any comments from the team online before we do the transition, and also here in the room, feel free if you have a comment that you want to, in that inspiring presentation. Anyone online who has any comments? I think we'll do a maximum of 5, and everybody can do at least 45 seconds.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ari. That's a wonderful presentation and very encouraging to see the progress that you are already making. I think for me, it's just 2 concerns that are actually quite related. One, of course, you mentioned that we are looking at potentially getting a loan to do this, and so that links to my second question, or comment rather that I have, is about the issue of market. We've talked about relatively large market, but at the same time, you say that while currently there's no capacity in this Central African region, we know at least 2 countries are also in the process of developing some capacity, and that even within Kenya we have like 3 other initiatives. And so I just wanted to understand or to hear from you what considerations have been made about just the market and the business case for this. You don't want to spend so much money and then now you have no market because there are too many people in the market. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Matilu. Yeah, it's a very exciting project. Just two very brief and quick questions. So one of them is, what informs your decision to let the government bear all the risk, as opposed to going the PPP route or another less risky venture, particularly with firms that are established in doing this and can help take away a lot of the risk, including the construction risks, and more importantly, the operations and management risks over a longer period of time. And then two, the decision to make this debt financing rather than equity, basically just trying to think about sharing the risk all around, and maybe if that can then help allow this to roll out a lot quicker if you're working with a firm that's already been doing this, and local government could actually even have the majority stake, but then you're building a lot on existing technology, existing expertise, and taking away a lot of the risk instead of plunging into it 100%. Thank you.
Okay. I think let's take a final comment and Prof, we can put them together.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Robert Karanja, and thank you, Prof. It's good to see you. Just a quick comment, honestly. So we've done quite a bit of work in terms of establishing the investment case for local vaccine manufacturing in Kenya, and with a country-specific investment case for that particular issue. So it's good to see how we can close ranks. So we do have the data. Actually, I've done a paper on that being presented during the East African Health Science Conference. That's also ongoing. And I feel like we have some of the gaps that we may be having probably solved on this other end of the go-to market. So let's find a way of how we can close ranks a bit.
Okay, great. I think, Prof, we'll invite you back so that you can put the comment together. I think we'll finish here with
Thank you. That's really great update for us. It's good to know that a lot is happening behind the scenes, so well done for that. For me is to ask, is there a link between the short-term cancer initiative through Viavax vis-a-vis what you're working on in Konza, and also, is the KEMSA facility dedicated only for COVID-19 vaccine, and for the long term, what sort of, I know you listed them there, but what sort of, are you thinking about COVID plus others, and with others, what is the strategy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. With regard to the business case, it seems to us that the countries that are interested in developing vaccines and those that are already in the activity like South Africa are doing first very little. In fact, they are doing it on behalf of agencies out there like Oxford, AstraZeneca, and so on. But they have not gone this route of dealing with the challenge that is coming to Kenya in 2027. Right? The second thing is that there are very many vaccines to be made. Rwanda was probably putting together a facility for dealing with COVID. Okay? But that facility obviously can do other vaccines, but again, is a tall order to expect it to do many of them. So the market is very large, and there are very many products, including serums and anti-snake venoms and so on, that one needs to make. So we can't go wrong there at all. So it's very difficult to be competing with somebody. Okay? Now, when we looked around the world, although I do not want to preempt the findings of any consultant who needs to earn his keep, if we look all over the world, there are very few countries where governments have produced vaccines successfully. Governments are not designed generally to be efficient and to be at that level. And even in our own discussions internally, we know very well that without a public-private partnership, it is very hard for us to have a sustainable initiative that is efficient and will give us value for money. Okay? but I'll stop at that particular point. Don't they're not paying me as a consultant. Then the other thing is that with regard to the initiatives, the KEMSA, the BioVac Institute, and this smart vaccines production facility, that kind of question is the kind of question we asked ourselves in this initiative when we had some additional pronouncements by the government. But it was clarified to us by the Ministry of Health that the government is supporting two initiatives. And in fact, it put somebody in charge of all initiatives to ensure that we are all speaking the same language. And when it comes to the nuts and bolts, we will decide whether we will do a certain kind of vaccine and the other initiative does a certain kind of vaccine. But in terms of COVID vaccines, the Korean government at the moment is not thinking the COVID route. That is the route that is being thought about by the BioVac Institute. Okay? It is conceivable that when we sit and start doing the math, we may be interested in COVID, but not now. Where our instructions are very clear and the instructions of the BioVac Institute are very clear. Thank you very much. And I take your comments very seriously, Dr. Karanja, and we can engage afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Maybe you can just hold on for some comments here from the online team. Maurice Olang says, wonderful and informative presentation. I've learned a lot going forward. Ferdinand Adungo says, actually asks a question. There's a general reluctance of the established farmer in sharing the intellectual property with LMICs. What strategies are in plan to secure dedicated support and collaboration with big pharma on this venture for long-term sustainability?
Thank you. I don't have an answer to that one for the following reason. Those, like if you look at the products they injected me with, like Sputnik or like Moderna, there are numerous patents belonging to numerous groups. So there's no one person who can easily come and tell you, make this thing. But this is what governments and the multinational agencies are good at, holding these sorts of discussions to see how best to pass on the licenses to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. I think the last comment here from Ambassador Mutua, presumption is at amb. Ambassador. Question, no, actually it's a comment, it's a good initiative by MOH and GOK. So thank you to hear from the online team, and it's great that you're part of us.